Welcome back to the county seat. We are joined for the discussion today about the changes that should happen, have happened, might happen with Grand Staircase and the reduction of the size of the monument. Joining us for the conversation, two people who have been very closely involved, clear back to when it became a monument. County Commissioner from Garfield County, Leland Pollock, and State Representative Mike Noel, who's authored a whole bunch of legislation about federal lands here in the state. Thank you for joining us. I want to start the conversation by saying Mike has inside knowledge about BLM management and put in 22 years?
22 years, yeah.
And you actually resigned in protest over the monument, or?
Yeah, I took an early out when the Grand Staircase was created. We were working on the Smoky Hollow mine, and some of the things that happened there were totally outside the law. The Don Young report from the Congress at that time, the minority report, spells it all out. Katie McGinney, we don't think this monument is right. We don't think we have to be able to back this, and that's all in the report. So we know it was totally a contrived deal. Everything was from the start to the end. Excellent.
Well, it sounds like I've got some future reading to do.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about we've looked at the path of the monument, its start, its reversal, and from a policy standpoint. But let's talk about on the ground now. You guys were happy, but has 4 months made a difference in your life out here since they rescinded the monument?
Well, the honeymoon's over now. We've got to go to work and get things done. So that means that 1,000 acres are still in the Grand Staircase under a monument type system. 1 million, and 1 million are out. That means the monument staff is going to manage the 1 million that's in, and in the same building in Kanab, the BLM Kanab field office is going to manage the 1 million that come out. So that's what the process is now.
Okay, but you say going to, and this is the part that I'm getting to, is, people thought on December 4th, whether you were for or you were against the reduction of the monument, that life on December 4th, 2017 was going to change. And when the president signed this declaration and came to Salt Lake, that the next day the sun would rise differently in Kane County and the policy would be different.
Actually, it's been a lot better for us on public land since Trump came in. I've got to put that plug in, but go ahead, Chad. I know where you're getting.
But the question is, have you noticed the change, or are they still running it like it used to be until they can go through the plan-making process?
I think it's changed significantly with some of the key personnel positions. Brian Steed is now the director of the Bureau of Land Management. He was Chris Stewart's former chief of staff, and we have access. We can talk to him, and I think he's doing a great job there. The problem is that we still have some of the same individuals within what I call the shadow government, the deep state government within the agency that are doing everything they can to thwart the ability of those that have been elected to office and are now in charge to make these changes. It takes a long time to turn the ship, and like the Queen Mary, it takes 40 miles to get her turned around. This one's going to be tough. So we just got notice this week there's going to be some scoping meetings on new monument plans, and we hope that's going to go forward. But what I really see is some drag out. As long as you can drag these out, this is what the internal bureaucracy does, is they don't have to make a decision. Then we get into potentially, if Trump doesn't win the next election, we get into a new administration. So there are a whole bunch of checkpoints. If we don't win Congress back, that's a checkpoint that could be difficult. If we lose more seats or lose some seats in the Senate, that's a checkpoint. So those are problems I see. And then just tying up Trump with every kind of action, legal things on the air, and what I call fake news and he calls fake news, it really makes it difficult. So that's a problem for us.
So I guess the question is, it dawned on me, okay, it's going to take a few years to get things changed. Did it take a few years to get them to stop managing as public land when they created the monument, or did those changes come quicker?
It took a while. I was involved when they were doing that. It took a while to do it because they did want input from the state, and they formed the teams and things. I'm going to say it took a couple of years, but again, we've had 20 plus years of with the monument and what worked and what didn't work, and more didn't work than did work in terms of multiple use and ability for Garfield County and for Kane County commissioners and the people that live there, the ranchers, the access. I mean, think about it. You've got this beautiful area in Garfield and King County. We had 4 or 5 million tourists come through here, and it's taken us 7 years to get a new power line from our cooperative. 7 years to put a new structure on it. Those things are still in play, Chad. Those things are still out there. The way that monument plan was written, it was really not friendly to people that want to go into the interior of the monument, that want to keep the roads open and be able to go in and actually see the monument. It was written to keep people out of the monument. And I haven't seen a lot of change, although people now are pretty confident that we're going to win our roads back. That's something that could happen very rapidly with the Bellwether Road case that's going forward. So we're hoping things are going to change.
But those changes are coming from a court side, not from
from
an agency
yes,
side.
That's right.
So are more roads open than in December?
Well, we kept the roads open, but the public doesn't know it yet. We've kept the road. Paria Canyon is not open. Mm-hmm. That's got to be something that we want to really focus on. Understand Kane County is going to actually notify the agency that we want the road open. You had time to do the work, and it affects you guys in Garfield County too, because it goes clear to Cannonville. So I don't know, Commissioner, tell us about that.
Well, and to add to what he said, let's talk about what's happened the last 21 years. It has not been managed correctly. The BLM was created in 1934 by the Taylor Grazing Act to manage rangeland, period. Here we come in 1996 and tell them to manage a national monument. They didn't know how. Period. I mean, Juan Palma, I'd quote him, he was the state director. He said we didn't know how to manage it. Okay, so that's an admission of the 21 years of basically a paradox of mismanagement. So here's what happens. Part of that monument, I've never argued, some of it, not even 1 million acres of it, probably 200,000 or 300,000 acres, is actually canyon country that people look at. Bryce Canyon up, you know, that you go up on the rim, 34,000 acres total in that park. Mm-hmm. Okay, this thing was 2 million acres by the time the state traded out land and everything. They couldn't manage it, and I'll tell you why. A lot of that land was never visited in that monument. It was regular sagebrush, rabbit brush, invasive weeds. All of that land should have been managed like the BLM was mandated in 1934 to manage it, and it was not. So what do you have? You have soil erosion, terrible soil erosion. You have springs that's dried up. You have pinyon and juniper encroachment. And we're not talking about canyon country. We're talking about blue clay, rabbit brush.
Sagebrush flats, massive
sagebrush flats.
Areas that previously had been under a different kind of management.
You've got real problem, and believe me, it's been blown out of proportion by special interest groups with their own agenda that this was some kind of a scenic area. It was never visited.
This is one of the fallacies, Chad, that we have had to continually fight. And when I get people calling me on the phone from back east and other states, and how could you go in and destroy this beautiful land, and you're getting rid of this monument, and I would try to explain to them, well, there's literally 5, 6, 7 layers of protections on those monuments. We talk about antiquities under the Antiquities Act. We don't even prosecute anybody under the Antiquities Act because it's a $500 fine and 90 days in jail maximum. We do it under the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. So you add these layers, the actual resource management plans that are out there that will develop, the monument plan, the Threatened Endangered Species Act, the Mineral Leasing Act, all those things that deal with the resources in the monument. You can't just park public land and expect that it's going to look better and do better. It doesn't work that way. That's how you get lots of erosion and lots of problems like Leland mentioned. And so you've got to go in and do some vegetative manipulation. You've got to do some work on it. You've got to be an active steward of the land. And that's what BLM was supposed to be, stewards of the land. They just bagged it. They said no.
So is this one area where they have made some headway? I noticed that in some of the ads complaining about chaining, that some of that acreage was actually within the remaining boundaries of the monuments.
Some of that area should be recovered, but no, that's just propaganda. The state of Utah, I urge everybody to go online, or I think it's a commercial, refuted that. That's not factual. So it shows the Watershed Restoration Initiative is what they're attacking. That does sage grouse recovery projects, endangered species recovery projects, watershed. So
but it's outside the monument, isn't it, Lee?
It's outside.
It's outside the monument.
Yeah, there's not been chaining.
There's been nothing done in the monument. It's all outside.
And when you say monument, you're talking about the new boundaries of the monument?
The old boundaries.
So the old boundaries. So
the old boundaries did not allow for vegetative manipulation. It didn't do it in the plan.
What impact did that have on you as a rancher?
The monument itself?
The monument, the fact that you had your grazing allotments because they promised them, but you couldn't manipulate the land to improve the conditions. Did it force cattle off the range?
Anybody that runs cattle knows you've got to have water. We've had water dry up all over the monument. And it's not just from a ranching perspective. This hurts all the wildlife. This hurts the lower end. Everybody loves the Ponsegont. I don't care. Worldwide renowned. It's famous.
In the whole United States, mule deer.
They've run out of water. They're hauling water to mule deer right now, down on the buckskin, on the lower end of the Ponsegont. Fact. Okay, so those are pretty serious impacts, and that's not just to the rancher.
And that comes, as we've learned in previous episodes, from not doing proper vegetative treatment.
Absolutely.
It's by turning what was a lush, diverse landscape into a solo monoculture of pinyon juniper, totally, no understory. So who owns the water in the state of Utah? We own 99% of the water. The federal government water rights are really tied to grazing rights. So if we own the water, one of the main things we want to do is make sure that the watershed is protected. You can't protect the watershed. Look what happened up here. This is outside the monument, Panguitch, with our Bryan Head fire. They destroyed 71,000 acres of watershed for Panguitch City. They lost their water rights here. So we have an absolute right to go in and say, we need to go protect those watersheds. We need to do some treatment. And as Levin talked about, the film that Sue said, call them and tell them to stop chaining. And then we came back with a film, which I actually initiated that whole thing with Mike Styler. Within a week, he had a film that says, here's what it looks like. You saw the bad part, here's the good part, and there's the film showing and refuting. We need to do more of that. We need to actually educate people in this whole process of this monument downsizing. What I found is that if we can communicate better with people, if we can sit down with them and say, do you want to be able to visit those areas? Do you want to be able to go on existing roads? Or do you want to walk 70 miles to get to a place where you want to go hike and camp? And you know this, Chad, you're out there all the time on at your leisure and you go see things out there. You have to have an access road. These are roads that are 50 years old at least, 10 years prior to 1976. We just want to maintain those, keep those roads open. They don't want us to do anything. It's a very, very closed-minded mentality of extreme environmental groups that get money out of it. They get money, get funds.
So what's the lesson that if people need to be educated, what do we need to be educated on in the next 5 minutes?
Manage the land correctly.
Be stewards of the land.
Yeah, the BLM had it right at one time. I mean, all of these areas that used to have feed for the cattle, for the wildlife, that used to have water, that was good rangeland, used to be managed correctly by the BLM, but we're going back into the 70s, 60s, and then these people with an agenda came in, and look what we've got. We've got real problems. And I'm going to add to this, an employee that worked for the monument. His name was Richard Madrill. He was a monument employee, BLM monument employee. He was a range specialist, and he said, verbatim quote, we are losing our soil. We have got to do something to save our soil on the monument. So they knew this was a problem, but they didn't manage correctly for it. So what we've got to do is manage the land correctly. Simple as that. We're not reinventing the wheel.
Are you worried that that by the time the wheels of federal process turn, that the ship will turn around again?
I'm very worried about that.
We're all worried.
Very, very worried. And so you have to have the right people in place. You've got a new captain at the very head. You've got some of his coaches in there, Brian Steed and others. But you have to fix the team. And the team are some of the entrenched bureaucrats. And there's a group of people on the team that don't want to play the way we want to play, which is multiple use, that don't want to live by the Federal Land Policy Management Act of 1976. When Congress signed off on that act and it was passed, they said, you will give the states very much control. Our planning efforts, our ability to use these lands is inherent in this plan. And that changed when Bill Clinton got in. That's when it really made the big change. When Babbitt and Clinton got in, he started creating monuments. We got more wilderness, 13 million of acres of wilderness that they want, which is basically leave the land alone. Don't do anything with it. Just let it just naturally, and you're going to get problems. You're going to have problems with it.
And we've had problems. True multiple use land was created for everyone. Multiple use means everyone. Not just grazing, not just hiking, not just hunting. Everybody gets to use the land, ATV use, okay? That was taken away by Bill Clinton. The area that that has been affected most, which is most of the monument, is multiple use type land. It is not like Bryce Canyon. That's the takeaway. I want everybody to look at this thing. And I'll come on out to Garfield County and Kane County. I'll show you the difference.
I hope your watchers would go look at a TED Talk by a guy by the name of Alan Savory. He was a wildlife biologist out of Africa. He's got a wonderful story to tell of how, if you leave things alone.
I've seen it.
You've seen that.
Yeah.
That is a very, very, very true film that he talks about in that TED Talk. That's what's happening. He shows the national parks. He shows BLM. He shows the rill and gully erosion. He shows decadent vegetation. When you create the parks and you take the wildlife out, and now we can't really do it with wildlife. We have to do it with cattle. So he's recovered all kinds of lands all across the world to protect watershed, to protect grazing, and to keep wild animals. We want to do that. We want our deer and our elk to be able to thrive here too.
So are you guys happy with, I mean, I know that the counties were asked to submit what they thought the monument should be, and then a decision was made for the reduction. Are you happy with what they did to reduce it?
Well, let me tell you, anything is better than what it was. Flat out. And we had a president for the first time that come out here, the state of Utah, the state legislature, the counties, the governor signed his resolution, representative, his resolution to come out and do this. And for the first time, a president of the United States come out and did that. We need to honor, at least, I hope, no matter what you think in Utah, honor that president for doing that.
In my 16 years in the legislature, we've sent resolution after resolution back to Congress to act on. And there's been one done, two now, with the one from Bears Ears and the one from Grand Staircase. They are probably the most significant things that have happened on public land management in the state of Utah in the history of the state. And only one president did it. And you know, the president, I was told that the president said to the Secretary Zink, he said, now why are we doing this out in Utah? And the secretary said, because it's the right thing to do. And he also said, you're not going to get anything from outside of Utah. You're just going to get nothing but grief from the rest of the United States. But the people of Utah absolutely appreciate what you've done, Mr. President, and it'll be a better landscape, it'll be better water management, it'll be better for the cattle and multiple use, and it'll have impacts for generations to come in the positive.
So what do we need to do? What's a call to action? Because we've got a time window, and we've got a process that you say is slowing down and being stalled. What do people that live in these rural parts of the state need
We got
to
to
do?
talk this guy into running again, because we've got
That's not a fair question for this
small window of
conversation.
opportunity.
We've
You
got
are
it.
absolutely right.
We
And
have to get it done.
I would support this president. He's done a great job, and we hope he wins again. But in all reality, we may only have 3 years. So we've all got to
We've got to
work
move
hard.
fast. We've got to move quickly. People have to see the
So what do you do to
report.
accelerate the process?
Do what we're doing. You got a lot of people working hard. This is one of them here. We're all working hard, Chad. We're doing our part, but we're
Can they truncate NEPA? Is there a way to make those things
I think
happen?
they can do it quicker. I think there's some requirements. We need some people in there that really can look at the regulations and say, this is what needs to be done, and the timing and everything. There's a process you have to go through, but I think they can do something immediately, and one of them would be Get some new people in there that really have the background and the interest in trying to go through this whole new plan and get it done in a rapid fashion. Get those people that really believe in multiple use of the public lands and not just setting this land aside and letting it become decadent.
Both of you believe that if we make those changes, that the land will be better for our grandchildren than it is today?
No question about it in my mind. No question about it.
Okay. Any last comments, gentlemen?
No, I mean, I think we hit that pretty good, Chad. I think it's been, you know, I've been at it over 20 years. Leland's been at it for how many years?
Well, I'm a lifetime resident, so we've
But I mean, as far as in the policies,
I've been a commissioner now almost 8 years.
8 years, but in the policy part of it, 8 years. I've been at it for 20 years, and even when I worked with the agency, my goal was to get some multiple use of the public lands, and that's one of the things that happened. And when that changed under the Clinton administration, it wasn't a good thing. And so I said, hey, I think I can do more on the outside. And I went into the legislative side and spent 16 years working with you, working with my brother from a different mother, and we've got a lot done. This Porter Rockwell right here, he's solid. He's solid. We've got a good thing of commissioners in my district, 21 county commissioners, are pretty much lockstep on this issue.
Now, scoping is always the place where people need to participate, and seldom do they. They always wait until it becomes a comment period on the plans they've come up with. How can people get engaged in the scoping? What do they need to do?
Well, we're advertising the scoping meetings right now. Go to the meetings.
You have to be an expert?
Look, we can't compete with the special interest groups as far as comments that they send in. They have form letters, but you know what? The powers that be know they're sending in form letters and getting lots of that. But I think I urge all of our local folks to come to these scoping meetings.
Yeah, there needs to be input. It's not the matter and the volume of letters, because like the commissioner just said, it's what's said in the letters. It's get the policy right, get the science right, and we strongly believe with the right science that we can have a better managed piece of land. I mean, 5,000 acres total between the Bears Ears and the Grand Staircase. We cut out 5,000 square miles. 5,000
right.
square miles. That's a lot of land to be tied up. That's bigger than some of the smaller states. So I think we can get it right, but we've got to be able to manage it. And you've got a lot of people that want to come and see these beautiful lands. And the way we do that is going to be very, very important.
Okay, last question. Is the park the Stewart's bill for a new park, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know. You got to realize that, and this is the honest answer to that. He has to get 60 votes in the Senate, and I caution people all the time. What Congressman Stewart is trying to do is lock in the boundaries so we don't have a ping-pong effect. Next president, reverse what this president did, and then back and forth and back and forth. What Congressman Stewart's goal is to lock those boundaries in. Whether a national park will get him the 60 votes in the Senate or not, boy, that's tough. That's what people need to, the number one takeaway is you got to get 60 votes in the Senate to make this happen.
I ran the resolution in the House. Ralph Oakland sponsored. Ralph was ill this session, but I ran the resolution to support the park and to solidify the 3 monuments created in the Grand Staircase. So create the Escalante Canyons National Park and Preserve, and then the 3. The way he has the management set up is how all national parks ought to be. We've got more local input into the management. He allows for hunting, which there's upwards of 60% of the parks allow for hunting. He allows for continued grazing in perpetuity as opposed to when your generation dies off. The concern that I have on this, Chad, is that I think the lawsuit that's coming forth by Patagonia and these other groups here, if in fact we win in the Supreme Court, which I believe we will, that a president can take a look at it and say, hey, this was not really done in a proper way. Most people realize what Clinton did on Grand Staircase was not done in a proper way. And if it's true and he can come back and he can downsize it, it's going to be much harder to go back and reverse that. You see what I'm saying? If you're saying, oh, we went down to 900 or a million, we went down to 1 million acres, we took out 900,000, because the courts realized this was done more for political reasons than to protect it. We can bring in some of this information during the Clinton administration, where the Council on Environmental Quality director, Katie McGinty, said, this doesn't even meet the requirements under the Antiquities Act. We can bring those things to the court and see that it was purely a political move, and then we can say we've had a good analysis of it, we think this is the right size, or we think there's a potential for even smaller reductions in it. So this does lock it in, and it's kind of like, we'll give you this if we lock this in. I think the court might actually say that and make that decision for us, that yes, this was done properly, it's smaller and it should have been smaller, it was too big in the first place. Go back to the original statute, and again, it depends on who's in that Supreme Court. We could get one more conservative Supreme Court justice to take Kennedy's place or Ruth Bader Ginsburg's place, and we could actually have a completely different court that would interpret that very, very directly from the Constitution and say, hey, they said the smallest area. Those monuments were never this big. And so I think we could actually win this thing and set some precedent in the Supreme Court of what can happen in the future. So I'm not willing to give up that we're still going to have a 1 million acre monument. I think there's ways that we can have smaller monuments, nice national park. You know, the Sierra Club came in and protested and said, we're against a new national park. 30,000 members in Utah, we're against a new national park.
Which baffles me, because they were so in favor of the monument. I'm still trying to figure that one out.
But how much clout does SUA and the Sierra Club get in the state of Utah? Much more than the people they actually represent in our state. One representative represents almost 40,000 people. All of Sierra Club represents 30, and SUA maybe has 20 total, yet they are in every headline. They are able to stop. They're in 50,000 roads and lawsuits. Why does that happen? It's because of the way the courts have interpreted these things, and they've been wrong. They've been totally wrong. So maybe we can change this. I don't know.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Thank you for staying with us. We'll be right back. We're going to take a personal look at how the monument and its history has affected some different people around the counties down here in Grand Staircase Land when we come back on the County Seat.